This document reveals an incredibly ruthless, highly effective system for forcing human beings to resolve their disputes neutrally and against a relentless timeline.
It strips away all that emotional chaos of an argument and just forces it through a highly engineered funnel.
Yeah, and the entire system is designed around one core philosophy, right? The project must survive.
Totally. Human egos, massive financial disagreements, simple misunderstandings, they will constantly threaten to derail the work, but the contract is built to absorb those shocks and keep the concrete pouring.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before a dispute can even be touched, we have to establish who is actually making the call, right?
Right. The cornerstone of this entire framework is the neutral referee.
Yeah, so the clause dictates that the engineer, the person overseeing the daily reality of the project, must act neutrally between the parties.
Which is huge.
It is. The contract mandates a literal verification that the engineer is not acting, or even deemed to act, for the employer when managing a dispute.
With the employer in this scenario being the entity holding the purse strings, paying for the entire development.
Right, and that's the piece I'm trying to wrap my head around. The engineer is hired by the employer.
Yes.
Their paycheck comes from the employer. But this contract legally demands that the second a multi-million-dollar dispute arises, the engineer has to, flip a psychological switch and become completely impartial.
That's the expectation, yeah.
I mean, in the real world, the pressure to favor the person signing your checks must be astronomical. It feels like being hired and paid by the home team's owner to referee a basketball game, but being legally mandated to call every single foul completely down the middle, even when the owner's screaming at you from the sidelines.
It's a great analogy, but what's fascinating here is that the contract anticipates that exact tension.
It does.
Yeah, it knows the financial dynamic exists and that, human nature leans toward pleasing the person paying the bills. But it also recognizes that without this explicit documented baseline of neutrality, the entire ecosystem of trust just collapses before the first shovel ever hits the dirt.
Wow, okay. Because I guess if I'm a contractor, and I know going into the bid that the referee is paid by the other side,
right,
and is inevitably going to rule against me every time we hit unexpected bedrock or, face a supply chain delay, I am absolutely going to inflate my bid.
But have to.
I would probably add 20 or 30% to my initial proposal just to cover my risk of dealing with a rigged game.
Exactly. You would price in the bias. Or if the risk was simply too high, you'd just refuse to bid on the project entirely,
Leaving the employer with fewer options and higher costs.
Precisely. So the strict contractual neutrality isn't just a nice moral idea, it's a fundamental economic necessity for the global construction market.
So by forcing the engineer to formally step out of their role as the employer's project manager and into the role of an impartial judge, it creates a psychological and legal boundary that protects the financial viability of the bid.
Yeah, it's a mandatory mental costume change.
I love that. Taking off the employer's jersey and putting on the black and white referee stripes.
And it is a legally binding costume change, too. If the engineer fails to maintain that neutrality, if they show a pattern of bias toward the employer, their determinations will be torn apart later in international arbitration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The engineer's professional reputation and their ability to get hired on the next mega project depends entirely on their ability to maintain that strict impartiality under immense pressure.
Okay, so we have our neutral referee. The home team bias has been stripped away.
Right.
Now, when a contractor submits a massive claim for unexpected costs, my assumption would be the engineer reviews the files, slams down a gavel, and just issues a ruling.
Most people assume that, yeah.
But that is not what happens. The framework demands that the first move is entirely focused on diplomacy.
Yes, the peacemaker phase. The engineer is required to consult with both parties, jointly or separately, and encourage discussion in an endeavor to reach an agreement.
Jointly or separately.
Yeah, they have flexibility. But they must start this consultation promptly, keep detailed records of every meeting, and if they actually get the two sides to agree, they issue a formal notice of the parties' agreement with a signed copy attached.
It sounds remarkably like a high-stakes hostage negotiation.
It kind of is.
Like the engineer is shuttling between rooms, trying to find mutual leverage, putting the employer and the contractor in a room, maybe separately to let them vent, maybe together to hash out the numbers.
Trying to find that one pressure point that gets them to compromise?
Exactly. Brokering peace over a $50 million concrete pour before anyone has to formally declare war.
Because the system recognizes that a mutually agreed upon solution is always, always vastly superior to an imposed one.
Why is that? Just less friction.
Well, when parties agree, they retain ownership of the solution. That prevents lingering resentment that could poison the rest of a 5-year project. The engineer's job in this phase is to help them realize that a prolonged fight will ultimately cost them both more than a slight compromise today.
Okay, I get that, but think about the couples therapist analogy. What if I'm dealing with massive egos on a billion-dollar site and the parties absolutely refuse to talk?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Right. Diplomacy alone isn't going to cut it. Let's say the contractor feels completely disrespected and the employer feels like they're being extorted. They dig their heels in.
Yeah.
How does the contract force the issue if the hostage negotiation is completely stalling?
Well, the entire framework is built around the fundamental reality that time is money. Delaying a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project costs absolute fortunes every single day.
Millions.
Yeah, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a day in overhead alone. Equipment rentals for cranes just sitting idle, labor costs for crews who can't work.
So you can't just talk forever.
No, you can't. The checklist requires consultation to commence promptly, but it includes a very specific trapdoor to prevent endless, expensive stalling.
A trapdoor to stop the bleeding.
Exactly. The clause dictates that if no agreement is achieved within the time limit, or if both parties simply advise the engineer that no agreement can be achieved, the engineer must immediately issue a notice stating exactly that.
A notice of no agreement.
Right. And then they instantly proceed to making a determination.
So the hostage negotiator realizes the demands are impossible, looks at the clock and says, diplomacy is over. I am now putting on my judge's robe.
Yes. The system shifts gears automatically to prevent paralysis. You tried to help them find a decision together. They refused. Now the contract demands that you impose a decision on them.
And here's where it gets really interesting. When that peacemaker phase fails and the judge's robe goes on, a literal timer starts ticking.
The shot clock.
Yeah. The engineer has to make a fair determination, detail their reasons, provide supporting particulars, and issue a formal notice of the engineer's determination. But they operate under a very rigid, unforgiving deadline.
They have exactly 42 days.
42 days.
Right. Now, there is room for the parties to mutually agree to an alternate time limit if the issue is exceptionally complex, but the default hard-coded baseline is 42 days.
And the part of this document that completely blew my mind is the automatic failsafe if they miss that deadline.
It's pretty brutal.
It is. It's like a shot clock in basketball.
Yeah.
You have 24 seconds to shoot the ball. If you don't take the shot before the buzzer goes off, the ball is dead, it's a turnover, and the game moves on. The referee doesn't pause the game, so you can sit and think about your shot. Under this FIDIC framework, if the engineer doesn't take the shot, meaning if they fail to issue their notice of determination within that 42-day window, the system just makes the decision for them.
Yes, and the nature of that automatic decision depends entirely on what is being determined.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, if it's a standard claim, let's say the contractor is asking for an extra $2 million because they hit unexpected underground water, and the engineer misses the 42-day deadline, the checklist dictates that this is a deemed rejection.
Whoa. The claim is automatically flat out denied.
Yep. The buzzer sounds, and you get absolutely nothing.
That is wild. And what if it's not a standard claim?
If it's another type of matter, not a standard claim for time or money, the missed deadline results in a deemed dispute. In that scenario, the issue skips the engineer entirely and goes straight to the Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Board.
The DAB.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is the next level of escalation.
You know, I want to look at the psychology of why a deemed rejection mechanism is even necessary in the first place.
It's a great question.
Because if I'm the engineer, I'm highly trained, I know the stakes, I know millions of dollars are on the line. Why would I ever just let the clock run out on a massive decision?
Fear.
Exactly, fear. Engineers are human. They might be terrified to make a highly controversial call that's going to anger the employer who pays them, while simultaneously infuriating the contractor who controls the massive workforce building the project.
The pressure can be paralyzing. The engineer might be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of paperwork submitted by the contractor's lawyers, or terrified of making a career-ending mistake on a high-profile, politically sensitive infrastructure project.
So they just bury their head in the sand.
Basically.
They hope if they ignore the file long enough, maybe the employer and the contractor will magically work it out themselves, or the problem will just fade away.
But the contract violently rejects that behavior. It says, You cannot paralyze this project with your hesitation. A bad decision, or in this case an automatic rejection, is actually better for the project's momentum than no decision at all.
Because it forces an outcome.
Exactly. It forces an outcome so the aggrieved party can instantly escalate it if they want to. The project keeps moving forward.
It removes the power of the pocket veto.
Oh.
You can't just leave the contentious file in the corner of your desk forever while the project grinds to a halt.
No, you really can't.
If you won't make a call, the contract will literally reach across the desk, stamp rejected on the file, and process it for you.
It is brilliant structural engineering applied directly to human bureaucracy. The mechanism forces everyone to act within the bounds of a relentless schedule.
So what does this all mean for the actual cash? Let's say the engineer did beat the buzzer. They issued their fair determination on day 40.
Okay.
What happens to the money? Because we are talking about massive capital flows that dictate whether subcontractors get paid and whether materials get delivered.
Well, the immediate effect is that the determination is legally binding. Both parties have to comply with it right then and there.
Instantly.
Yes. If the determination involves the employer owing the contractor money, the contractor puts that amount in their next statement, and the engineer must include it in the following payment certificate. Cash starts flowing based on that decision immediately.
But humans make mistakes. We are flawed creatures.
Very true.
This framework includes an incredibly specific, hyper-focused rule just for typos.
Ah, yes, the typo rule.
It states that if there is a typographical, clerical, or arithmetical error found by the engineer within 14 days, they have to immediately notify the parties. Or, if a party finds the error within those same 14 days, they notify the engineer. Then the engineer has exactly 7 days to issue a corrected notice.
It's a very tight window. 14 days to spot the typo, 7 days to fix it.
I'm trying to visualize the scale of this. We're talking about binding legal decisions that impact whether a mega project survives. It seems almost absurd that a bureaucratic machine of this size can be paused just because someone forgot to carry a 1 or misplaced a decimal point on a spreadsheet.
But this raises an important question about how capital actually moves. You have to look at the financial heartbeat of global construction. Massive capital flows are tied intrinsically to these payment certificates.
Right.
Money is physically leaving bank accounts and crossing international borders based on these exact documents. The contractor relies on that cash flow to pay their subcontractors. If the money stops, the whole site could go on strike.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about a strike.
Yeah, so if a clerical error isn't corrected within a single financial cycle, which is typically that 14-day window, the wrong amount of money gets paid out. And trying to claw back $1 million overpayment from a global contractor after the check has cleared?
Good luck with that.
Right. It's a logistical and legal nightmare.
So it's about stopping the check before it physically clears the bank. But there has to be a danger here. What stops a contractor who is furious with the ruling from saying, oh, the engineer made a typo, they wrote deny instead of approve? We need to pause the whole thing while we sort out this clerical error.
The contract authors anticipated that exact tactic. The clause explicitly limits this to typographical, clerical, or arithmetical error.
Very specific.
Highly specific. It intentionally does not include an error in judgment or an error in interpreting the contract terms. They are deliberately separating pure clerical mistakes from actual fundamental disputes.
Ah, I see.
So if you write 1 million instead of 10 million by accident, the contract gives you a fast-track window to clean up the paperwork so the money flows correctly.
But if you try to use that 14-day typo window to secretly renegotiate the core ruling or, delay the implementation of a decision you hate, the contract slams the door in your face.
Exactly. Anything deeper than a misplaced decimal point isn't an error, it's a dispute. And that requires a totally different level of rebellion.
Which brings us to the final escalation path.
Right.
We fixed the math. The determination is officially stamped. But one party fundamentally hates the engineer's fair determination.
It happens.
They think it's completely wrong. How do they rebel against a binding decision?
They issue a notice of dissatisfaction, commonly referred to in the industry as an NOD. And again, the ticking clock is back to govern their behavior.
Always the clock.
Always. The angry party has exactly 28 days after receiving the engineer's determination to issue this NOD. They have to state clearly that it is a notice of dissatisfaction, and they have to lay out their specific reasons.
And if they do?
If they successfully do this, the dispute is elevated to the DAAB.
Look at the penalty for missing that deadline, though. If no NOD is given by either party within that 28-day period, the determination is deemed accepted by both parties and treated as final and binding.
Speak now or forever hold your peace, literally.
Literally.
It creates absolute finality. In construction, lingering uncertainty is toxic. You cannot come back 6 months later at the very end of the project when you are trying to squeeze out more profit and say, oh, by the way, I was actually really unhappy with that ruling you made back in March. I want to reopen it.
We need to talk about March.
Yeah, no. If you didn't file the NOD within those 28 days, the argument is legally dead and buried. You accepted it and you must move on.
The absolute smartest part of this entire framework, in my opinion, is the Corning strategy.
The severability rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's say the engineer's determination is complex and has 5 different parts to it. Rulings on time extensions, rulings on different material costs, rulings on labor. I am the contractor. I agree with 4 of those parts, but I furiously disagree with the 5th part regarding the labor cost.
Right.
The checklist states that if I am dissatisfied with only part of the determination, I identify that specific part in my NOD. And then that specific part is treated as severable from the rest of the determination.
Severability is an incredibly powerful legal concept. It prevents a localized infection from killing the entire organism.
It's like being at a high-end restaurant. You order a steak, a baked potato, and a side of asparagus.
Okay, making me hungry.
The waiter brings it out, and the steak is cooked perfectly, the potato is perfect, but the asparagus is completely burnt to a crisp.
Tragic.
Right. But you don't throw the entire meal into the garbage, flip the table, and storm out of the restaurant.
Of course not.
You sever the problem, you send back the burnt side dish to the kitchen, you keep the steak, and you start eating. You quarantine the bad parts so the rest of the meal, or in this case, the rest of the multi-billion-dollar project, can move forward.
That's spot on, because a new airport terminal is essentially a million tiny decisions stacked on top of each other over the course of 5 years. If every single minor disagreement paused the entire contract, if you threw out the whole meal every time a single side dish was wrong, literally nothing would ever get built. The FIDIC framework segments the disagreements. It quarantines the toxic, disputed parts of the conflict, sends them off to the adjudication board to be fought over in isolation, while legally enforcing the agreed-upon parts so the foundation gets poured, the wiring gets installed, and the money keeps flowing to the workers.
What happens if a party just refuses to play ball, though? Like, if they ignore a final and binding determination completely and just stop working?
The other party can refer that failure directly to international arbitration. You bypass all the other adjudication steps.
Straight to arbitration.
Straight there. The system has zero tolerance for anyone who simply ignores a final ruling. It is the ultimate nuclear option to force compliance.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the journey we've just been on.
It's been a ride.
It really has. We started with what looks like a totally dry administrative procedural checklist buried in a massive legal textbook.
Oh.
But what we've actually explored is a brilliantly engineered framework for governing a massive, high-stakes ecosystem.
It's truly a marvel of procedural design. It forces human nature to conform to a strict, logical schedule, mitigating our worst impulses to stall, hide, or argue endlessly.
Yeah, we saw how it establishes a truly neutral referee, forcing the engineer to strip off their home team jersey despite immense financial pressure. We watched it mandate hostage negotiation-style consultation, demanding that the parties try to find mutual leverage and broker peace before the gavel comes down.
And then, when diplomacy fails, we saw the ruthless enforcement of the 42-day shot clock. Miss the deadline, and the system makes the decision for you with a deemed rejection.
We navigated the precision of the 14-day typo window, ensuring that massive capital flows aren't derailed by simple clerical errors, while strictly preventing parties from disguising a fundamental dispute as a typo.
And finally, we looked at the 28-day notice of dissatisfaction and that amazing severability rule, that quarantine strategy that allows a project to survive its own internal disputes by cutting out the infected parts and letting the healthy parts keep moving forward.
It's important to remember that while this checklist is built for global construction, the underlying logic is universal.
Absolutely. It is a framework for managing human bias, preventing endless delays, and forcing actionable decisions in any environment where the stakes are incredibly high and the people involved are incredibly stubborn.
Which is pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
You look at this system and it just makes you wonder about the messy, drawn-out conflicts we allow to fester in our own lives because we don't have these forced mechanisms.
Yeah, we don't have a 42-day buzzer forcing us to act.
We let difficult decisions sit on the desk indefinitely, hoping they just magically resolve themselves. So I want to leave you with a final thought today. Look at your own life, your own business, your own team. Where are you currently deadlocked? And where could you benefit from implementing your own strict 42-day deemed rejection rule?
Or think about that restaurant analogy.
Exactly. Where in your life do you need to start severing out the parts you disagree on, quarantining the burnt side dishes, so you can finally move forward and enjoy the rest of the meal? Because as we've learned today, the only way to beat the chaos of a massive conflict is to make sure you're the one controlling the ticking clock.
Download the free PDF checklist from our website. See the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see you next time.